Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the intervention program foundations. There is a lot to say, and Wilson's language has a few different foundations programs that I will jump into in just a moment. Foundations is a multisensory, structured reading and spelling program for students of all ages. Foundations comprise of four programs: preventative, early intervention, intervention, and intensive intervention. In my school, we use preventative in our classrooms. And Foundations emphasizes the following essential literacy skills: phonemic awareness, phonics, word study, high frequency word study, reading fluency, vocabulary, comprehension strategies, handwriting, and spelling. From my experience, I feel this is all true. This is stated on the Wilson's Language website. However, the comprehension strategies are lacking, and the text provided for foundations do lack meaning, but these passages do assist in reading fluency as far as pacing and phrasing goes. Um, like I said, the school I work with use, uses foundations as our phonics curriculum. I have 2 years' experience with the Preventative Foundations program in second grade. I have loved it so far, and my principal this year has been very strict about us following it to fidelity, and I'd always wondered why, but through my research and readings on foundations, I think I really do understand why now. So, the history behind Wilson's Language Foundations: it was founded in 1985 by Barbara Wilson and her husband. Barbara Wilson started with a learning center to provide intervention for students with reading disabilities, specifically dyslexia. Barbara Wilson had worked in a home with adults who were dyslexic, and she did receive Orton Gillingham training, and that's really where her work began until she branched off and created Wilson's Language. Um, in 2002, the Foundation's first edition was published, and in 2022, the Virtual Resource Fun Hub was published. So I think it was important to look at these two dates of 2002 and 2020 because it shows that this program is constantly evolving to the needs of the students in elementary schools right now and responding to teachers who request virtual resources and want to take things a step further, especially after the pandemic. I have used FunHub in my classroom. Right now, I'm locked out of it, but FunHub was an awesome resource and was another way to use all the materials to fidelity on the teacher end without becoming disorganized because that can be an issue from time to time. Some of the research I found was interesting. In particular, I looked at case studies comparing Lexia and Foundations. I don't know much about Lexia, but after reading this this research, I figured out that Lexia is a computer program that was used at home in this instance. The study examined the impact of Wilson's Foundations program by ensuring fidelity to its implementation, and the effects were wonderful on the case studies, as you can see in Figure 6, comparing these two case studies. But the key word here is fidelity because if it is not followed to fidelity, it will not have the same effects. Where, for an example, in my school last year, there were many teachers who didn't want to use the magnet letter boards because they were a challenge to keep organized and they could be a distraction at times. But that's actually one of the most important parts of the program is the multisensory aspect. And if our students weren't getting that because of a teacher unwilling to sort of relinquish control, then the program was not followed to fidelity and could not be successful as it has been proved to be in so many ways. Um, excuse me. Foundations also has to be paired with another reading, writing, core literacy program to have the most proficient effect on students' literacy development because foundations really does not hit core comprehension and text structure standards in the way we would need it to for it to be a primary literacy curriculum across reading, writing, and phonics instruction. It would be interesting if it was, but however, I think it's better kept separate for the time. Some of the strengths of Foundations is that it is a multisensory program and it directly impacts reading success. It is research based. There is a clear scope and sequence that they would like you to follow. Repeated practice, which I think is a really important aspect to mention, especially for readers who are approaching fluency. For example, if a student doesn't have all their vowel sounds, the drill sound portion of the lesson will be extremely important to them to retain those sounds and recognize the accompanying letters. And another strength I listed was that there are virtual resources. So teachers have that opportunity to enhance their lessons, or if materials are lost, broken, or destroyed, which we know all too well in education, there is that virtual resources sort of a backboard, but I wouldn't rely on it too much because it will take away some of the multisensory aspects to it. Some of the weaknesses are that there's limited peer interaction. From time to time, there are games implemented in foundations, and that's a great way for peers to interact, but it's majority teacher led. Limited time for small group instruction. And when I say limited time, I really should have written no time for small group instruction um, because the lessons are shorter, and in my experience, my school has 25 minutes for foundation, so it's really important that the teacher is introducing the new concepts and the students are practicing those concepts after the teacher models and explains them. So there are no time for small group instruction. Um, and the scope and sequence can feel unorganized. To implement foundations, I'm going to speak about the preventative intervention program because that's what I know the best. And again, I just want to emphasize that foundations is a scripted program and a PACE program and should be done to fidelity to be successful. This is just a little bit of an example of how a foundations lesson would go. You would always begin with your drill sounds warm up. So the teacher should have a magnet board with their magnet letters on that board, and students have their own magnet boards that should match. But at this point, students do not have out those magnet boards yet. The drill sounds should be led by a teacher holding Baby Echo, the owl, on a stick, and beginning with vowel sounds A, apple, ah. Um, in the beginning of the year, you want to drill all the consonants, but moving forward, you can choose about 5 or 6, and the consonant doesn't get the keyword. So, for example, you would say A, apple, ah, students would echo you. Then you would say C, k, students would echo you. Part of the drill sounds is also drilling whatever concept you are working on that week. An example I have here is long and short vowel sounds poster. So we would say A, apple, ah, and then we would say A, safe, A, so on and so forth. Another one that you might be working on are the R controlled vowels. Moving on to the word of the day. This is not in every single lesson, but it does appear often enough for me to mention it. The teacher will usually introduce the word like like the word predict, and the teacher might ask a question to get students thinking, like, who predicts the weather? And students would be able to respond, a weather person. And then the teacher will build the word with the sound cards. Students will tap it out. We'll have a quick conversation about its meaning, and then students are sent off to write the word and mark it up by marking the syllables and vowel sounds in the word. They will write it and use it in a sentence, and then we will share sentences to check for understanding of that vocabulary. Um, Next up, we would introduce new concepts. So, this is a very teacher led portion of the lesson for the teacher to model new concepts. The scripts do it in an interesting way, and it does have some student involvement. Um, Students can then use their letterboards to build words and echo new sounds with Echo the Owl, which would look like students at their desk, and a teacher might be holding Big Echo and say, "Can you point to the sound that says aw?" And then students should have their finger on that AW magnet. After introducing new concepts, you might do dictation instead of magnet board work, where students work in their notebook and the teacher dictates sounds, review words, current words, and trick words. And trick words is really that high frequency word practice. And I do think Foundations does a really good job of incorporating high frequency word instruction. And then another portion I wanted to mention that I think is really important and I wish came up a little bit more in Foundations lesson is the make it fun parts. Um, it requires some teacher preparation, and students usually play games according to the new concept. For example, my students just played a game where I had words on index cards and they had to mark them up in two different syllables. And then one student would read the word and the other students would pop up for their syllable. Below, I do have a link to a lesson example that I thought was a really great example for people to look at who might be just starting off. Another thing I want to say about implementing Foundations is that even though it is not used as a reading comprehension program and it should be paired with another reading program, during my reading time, I will utilize Foundations materials to instruct students in phonics who need that extra practice. So, whether that's using one of the Foundations posters with targeted sounds or just drilling sounds with a student and building words, I find that to be a really great way to incorporate phonics small group instruction in a way that students remember and they can apply to Foundations, and then they could bring their Foundation skills into their reading and writing. So that's something that I found really helpful about this program as well, although I don't think that is the intention of the program. And here are my references. I hope you enjoyed my presentation about Foundations. I'm still learning about it and getting to know the scope and sequence. Thank you.